Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, all three stories are connected to the Bharatiya Janata Party. We will talk about how the ruling BJP government in Karnataka has been wanting to use an Idgah Maidan for Hindu festivities. We will also talk about BJP MP Brij Bhushan Singh, the president of the Wrestling Federation of India, and his rather odd and questionable behavior at wrestling bouts. But we begin today by talking about the Jharkhand torture case. Earlier this week, a shocking case of gruesome violence came to light in Jharkhand. The incident involved BJP leader Seema Patra, who has now been booked for allegedly torturing her domestic help Sunita Khaka, and even sending her son to a psychiatric hospital when he tried to stop her. Seema Patra, up until recently, was the national executive member of the BJP. She was also involved with BJP's Mahila Morcha in the state and was often seen with other leaders with the party stole around her neck. When we spoke to Indian Express's Abhishek Angad about the case, he told us how the entire matter first came to light. Now, before we get to Abhishek, just a quick note that besides Seema Patra and the domestic help Sunita, there are two other people who will be talked about a lot in this story. One is Ayushman, who is Seema Patra's son, and the second is Vivek Anand Baski, the person who had filed the complaint with the police. Both Ayushman and Baski were batchmates in college, and over the years had stayed in touch. And Ayushman was the one who first told Baski about the matter.
So on August 2nd, Baski received a very frantic call from Ayushman at around 1:15, 1:30 a.m. And the call was made to him to just ask him to help him in a sense that he wanted the maid which worked in his house to be rescued. And he said that something very bad is happening.
Abhishek says that during this phone call, Baski could even hear a ruckus going on in the background. So he rushed to Seema Patra's house. Upon reaching there, he met Seema and told her about his phone call with Ayushman.
But Seema Patra didn't allow him to meet Ayushman and said that there is no problem at all and her son has gone out of his mind and there is no issue at home.
That day, Baski went back home without finding anything else about the situation. But then more than 2 weeks later, Baski's wife received a call from Ayushman. And in this call, Ayushman told her that Sunita was in a really bad condition.
And she's not been able to even go to washroom and she urinates and defecates in her own dress and she's also tortured by his mother. So since Baski come from a tribal community and the maid also from a tribal community, so Ayushman made a point there that since they both are from tribal communities, so Mr. Baski will be able to rescue her. And they spoke for like an hour or so and he sent a few pictures as well to Mr. Baski's wife.
And Baski's wife then told Baski about this call. And that is when they knew that something was terribly wrong. Baski then gave Seema Patra a call. But she again denied these allegations and instead said that Ayushman's mental health was worsening, that he was becoming violent, and that he needed to be sent to a psychiatric institute.
So Seema Patra called him next day and said, we are going to a psychiatric institute and we would like you to accompany us. So because her husband was not there and then Baski, Seema Patra, they went to Central Institute of Psychiatry, which comes under Government of India here.
This was the first time since he came to know about the situation that Baski was meeting Ayushman. And when they met, Ayushman was able to recognize Baski and was able to talk to him.
So that was the first time that made him think that his senses are working. Then the doctors and everyone started diagnosing him and counseling his mother as well. But even then, handcuffed Ayushman because her mother had said that he has gone violent and she had to take police's help to bring him to the institute. Even in front of the police and mother and the doctor, he told his mother, you made her drink, that is, the maid, her urine. What kind of inhuman person you are. These two sentences actually struck Baski that something wrong is going on.
And throughout their time at the hospital, Ayushman kept repeating that Baski had to save Sunita, that he had to do something about it. Later that day, Ayushman ended up being admitted to another facility. But when Baski returned home, he and his wife decided to approach the police. The next day, they went to the office of the Deputy Commissioner of Ranchi and showed them the photos that Ayushman had sent them. But the police said that they cannot search the premises of Seema Patra just on the basis of these photos.
Also being that Seema Patra herself being a leader with the BJP and her husband is a former IS officer. So as the scheme of things that ran out, then Mr. Baski thought that the only way that the things will move if I lodge a complaint. So then the next day, that is August 22, he lodged a complaint in the Agora police station where he detailed each and everything what has happened in the last 4 days or since August 2. And he makes pointers and says that how Sunita is being also tortured. She's not in good health. She has not seen sunlight for the last 3 years. And her husband is also not seen sunlight for the last 6 months. So all these very gruesome details that came out from the complaint, and the police registered an FIR based on that complaint. And then there was search that had happened, and they finally were able to rescue the maid, Sunita Khaka.
After Sunita was rescued, Seema Patra was found absconding. And then later, a video of Sunita, where she is talking about her situation, went viral on social media. In this video, she is talking in broken Hindi and saying how Seema used to beat her up with iron rods and hot pans.
हाँ लोहा का उससे मारा
वो जो बेल्ट है ना उसको मारती थी
आपको उसका बेल्ट था ना
हाँ और जो गरम तवा चला चला के मारती
कोई नहीं सुन सब ठीक हो जाएगा। तू ना हिम्मत रखना, ठीक है? हम लोग हैं।
हम चाहते हैं ना जब ठीक हुए ना अब आगे और पढ़ना चाहिए।
एकदम हम लोग पढ़ाएंगे बेटा, हम लोग पढ़ाएंगे बाबू।
Abhishek says that after this video surfaced online, Jharkhand Governor Ramesh Bains ordered an inquiry into the situation and asked the police to submit a report within 2 days. The next day, Seema was arrested.
And she was presented in a court and sent to 14 days judicial custody. However, while they were going, some reporters asked her about each and everything that has been going on, then where she said that I am innocent. So the day it surfaced, the problem and the issue surfaced, BJP's Rajya Sabha MP and State President Deepak Prakash said that we have immediately suspended her from the party. And yesterday, former Chief Minister Raghubar Das also tweeted in the night saying that this is a very horrific and gruesome act and this is very inhuman and the culprit should be punished for the act.
And next we talk about the Bengaluru Idgah. Earlier this week, the Karnataka government, which currently has the BJP in power, allowed Ganesh Chaturthi to be celebrated inside an Idgah in the city of Bengaluru. This was the Chamrajpet Idgah, which is a little over 2 acres in size and lies in the heart of the city. Now, for those who may not know, an Idgah in Islamic culture is an open space which is reserved for prayers, especially during Eid. So after the state government allowed the Hindu festivities to take place there, the Waqf board, which owns the property, challenged the decision in the Supreme Court. And the top court refused to allow the Ganesh Utsav to take place there. But the question is, on what basis did the government even allow these celebrations to take place? And since when has it been pushing for this Idgah to be used for other purposes? When we spoke to Indian Express's Apurva Vishwanath, who reports on law for the paper, she told us how it all started.
So the recent controversy began sometime in May. It started with a revenue officer on his own account, which is what we say suo moto, issuing a notice to the Idgah. I mean, this is a show cause notice, and he says bring documents that prove the title of this property.
Meaning prove that this property in fact belongs to you.
And there is no provision under law under which the revenue officer can do that, can call for inspection of title documents. So after the revenue officer's show cause notice, he also writes a report to Brihad Bengaluru Mahanagarapalike, which is the local municipal body, that there is a dispute concerning the title of this Idgah. This Idgah is in the heart of Bangalore in Chamarajpete. It's more than 2 acres of land. So usually you have children playing in it. It's used as a playground when it is not used for prayers. So the Idgah sometime in July then moves to Karnataka High Court, challenging these show cause notices and other litigation that has sort of come up since May. And the Karnataka High Court, a single judge bench of Justice Hemant Chandragaudar, he on 25th August passed an order.
In this order, the court said that the Idgah can only be used for specific purposes. The government could use it for Independence and Republic Day celebrations. The Muslim community could use it for prayers during Ramzan and Bakrid, and otherwise the land could be used as a playground for children.
So this was an order that was passed on 25th of August. But what we see is the urgency with which the Karnataka government files an appeal against this order. On 26th August, the state government files an appeal against this order. And on the same day, it is listed and heard by a division bench, which is a 2-judge bench in a high court. So on 26th, you have a bench that is headed by Karnataka High Court Chief Justice Alok Aradhe. And one of the things that the state government asks for is expansion of the use of the Idgah land. The single judge, had said that you can only use it for specific purposes. The state government in its plea says, but why restrict the government's right to use it for whatever purpose we want? And specifically for emergency purposes, which is quote unquote to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. The Karnataka government, in fact, goes on to give some examples saying, during the pandemic, we've used public land such as vacant grounds or halls that belongs to the government as makeshift hospitals and containment centers. So it should be within the realm of the government's use of its power to use this Idgah land as whatever they deem necessary.
So the government is essentially saying that the use of this Idgah land should not be restricted, and that it should be able to use it for whatever purpose that it wants.
So this division bench of the Karnataka High Court then on the same day, which is 26th of August, passes an order, says that India is such a multi-religious country and you can't really exclude festivities out of any celebration. So then the High Court says from 31st of August onwards, the government can use it not for all and sundry purposes, but for cultural and religious purposes. So which means the government can use it, for example, to celebrate a Ganesh Utsav on 31st of August.
And this is how the government was able to allow the Ganesh Utsav to be celebrated on this land, because the High Court allowed it to do so. But the reason that the celebrations were not able to take place is because the matter was challenged in the Supreme Court, and as mentioned earlier, the court denied permissions for it. Now, when talking about the rights that the Waqf board has on the property, Apurva says that there is a Supreme Court judgment that says that it is their property.
And also what senior advocate Kapil Sibal, who was appearing for the Idgah, argued is that when the land was declared a Waqf property and was notified under the Waqf Act, the state government had some time to challenge that decision. At that point, they chose to challenge some of the notifications, but it did not include this particular Idgah. So, which means by inference that you're waiving your right or you're agreeing that this is a deemed Waqf property. So both these aspects, show that the title is on this side, is with the Idgah. But what the government is now arguing is that this is a playground and has always been a playground. And in the municipal records, it shows that the land is actually in the name of the corporation. So that is what the state government is arguing. But it says that pending litigation, which is now before a single judge bench, that the government should be able to use it however it wants to.
Now, since this entire matter started with that one revenue officer asking the Waqf board to prove the title of the property, Apurva points out that this officer actually cited some media reports that questioned who the property actually belonged to.
So it is questionable about how this new round of litigation began. And the Supreme Court sort of looks at all of this and says, but what is the urgency in using it for Ganesh Chaturthi at this point of time. If for 200 years there has been no other religious activity except for Muslim festivals that has been celebrated in this piece of land, what is the compelling urgency for the state to do it now? And here, Mukul Rohatgi, who's a senior advocate who appeared for the Karnataka government, also conceded in court and said the land has not been used for any other purpose for 200 years. Except this year, the Independence Day celebration happened there. That was the first time the Independence Day celebration happens there. So the Idgah also said that they will celebrate national festivals there. But for the state to permit celebration of festivals of other religions, pending this litigation, that was an issue that was raised in court.
Apurva says that this matter also has a lot of political significance, especially considering the fact that Karnataka has witnessed a series of communally polarizing incidents in the recent past. This has included the hijab controversy and the banning of Muslims at the temple fairs. Plus, the right-wing groups in the state have been pushing the government to take over the Idgah land and declare it a public ground. And issues like this matter to the government in power.
So the only southern state where the BJP has some foothold and is able to win elections on its own is Karnataka. When Yadurappa was as BJP chief minister in the state, we've seen this sort of attachment to communities that the BJP has developed over the years, whether it was the Lingayat Mats or other communities. But now with Basavaraj Bommai at the helm, what we are seeing is more perhaps of a yogi style of government where religious polarization has surfaced time and again. We just saw the hijab controversy in the state, and now there is this push to celebrate Ganesh Utsav in Idgahs. And you see the state's hand playing in, especially this Idgah issue so clearly. This is something that the Supreme Court also repeatedly asked the state. What is the compelling reason that prompts the state government to act so urgently to ensure that on 31st August, there is a Ganesh Utsav celebration in an Idgah where something like this hasn't happened for 200 years. So I think that's pretty much the reason why there was an interim order, directing status quo that was passed in the Supreme Court. They said hold the puja at some other location and go back to the High Court. There is no pressing urgency to do this. But with an election around the corner, perhaps this will be a long-drawn issue. So now the next round of litigation that will continue is before the single judge bench that we talked about earlier. So the single judge will still have to decide the issue of the title at some point. But there is also the question of the High Court's modification, right? So that the Supreme Court has stayed for now, but the validity of that again will have to be challenged. If not Ganesh Utsav, there is another festival, there is another use that the government can bring up again. So that also might come back to the court.
And in the end, we talk about wrestling. Earlier this week, the Wrestling Federation of India was organizing a bout which would determine who would represent India at the World Championship in the 59 kg category. But less than a minute after it started, the bout was stopped by BJP MP Brij Bhushan Singh, the president of the Wrestling Federation of India. And he stopped it for a very odd reason. Indian Express's Mihir Vasavda had been there when that happened. And he now joins us to talk about it. So Mihir set the scene for us. The bout had already begun. The players were all ready. They had warmed up. So why did the bout stop?
There are many reasons for bouts to be stopped. Sharang, the usual ones you'd think ki agar someone's injured, there is some technical malfunction. There are hundreds of reasons that a bout can be stopped for, though it's very rare it happens. Over here, there was none of that. There was no injuries, there was no technical mishap, but it was just stopped exactly 54 seconds into the bout by the president of the Wrestling Federation of India, Brij Bhushan Singh. He is also a BJP MP. And the reason for that was that Brij Bhushan Sharan had invited these sadhus from Hanuman Gari Math in Ayodhya. And their role was, before the start of every bout, some of them he would announce, he had a list. And from that list, he would say, person A and B would go and bless these wrestlers. Person C and D would go and bless particular wrestlers. And while this particular bout in the 59 kg category between Pooja Danda and Mansi, she's an upcoming wrestler, just after it started, Brij Bhushan realized that he had forgotten to ask the sadhus to quote-unquote bless those two goals. And so he just... it's so bizarre that even as I say it, it sounds funny. But yeah, 54 seconds, he just took his mic. He told the referees, okay, you stop the bout because we've forgotten. And the bout stops around 2 sadhus along with some 3-4 hangers on and stuff. They go onto the mat and suddenly the girls are confused. They don't know what's happening. It was like you said, they were all warmed up. They were in that zone, and it was an important one because the winner of this bout would represent India in the World Championship. So it had a big, wider context to it. And somehow, the girls, even though they were disappointed, they had to go through that entire process where it lasted for a couple of minutes. And after blessings were showered, photos were taken, Brij Bhushan urged the sadhus to leave the mat, return to the sofa so that they could watch the girls compete.
And Mihir, how unusual is it, one, for the bout to be stopped this way? And two, how unusual is it for sadhus essentially to be chief guests in a wrestling bout?
Okay, so I don't see a straightforward answer to this question. So the first question you asked, right? How often are bouts stopped? Now, if you have seen Indian domestic wrestling, you'll realize it's not that common because the president, Brij Bhushan Charan Singh, he's like this one-man army. He's like the last word on all things Indian wrestling. And he has a very, very unique, uncanny way of operating. So be it any tournament, be it a junior tournament or the senior nationals, wrestling selection trials, or even something like an Asia Cup. At Asia Cup, he doesn't stop bouts, but his style is that he'll have a sofa placed right next to the mats. And there are 2-3 mats so that multiple bouts are going on simultaneously. So he'll be sitting on a sofa with a mic in his hand. He'll be overlooking all those bouts. And as per his fancies, right? If he spots something which, according to his logic, is not right, he'll stop the bout. So this wasn't the only occasion during the selection trials where the bout was stopped. Earlier that day, there was another match where Brij Bhushan thought the referee hadn't awarded the points correctly. So it was extremely strange because the match was again a very high intensity one. And one of the wrestlers was in middle of a very, very nice move where she had just lifted the girl in the air and she was about to throw her on the mat for a couple of points. But while in middle of that action, Brij Bhushan just took his mic and he was like, referee, आप जरा 1 minute ये रोकिए, मुझे लग रहा है कि आपने गलत व्यक्ति को points award कर दिए थे. And the referee was like, what should I do? And he had no other choice but to stop the bout. The girls again were slightly confused. Brij Bhushan asked them to go and check the videos again, which they did. And the referees realized that they weren't wrong. They had awarded the points in the right manner. And the good thing over here is, if at all we can describe it as a good thing, is that Brij Bhushan doesn't kind of overpower or supersede referee's decision. So referees explained it to him why they had awarded the certain way and he was okay with it. But point being that he does stop bouts according to his whims and fancies.
Okay, so that answers the first question. But what about sadhus being there at an important wrestling bout?
Look, it is wrong. If we were to opinionate, it is wrong because it just leads to many complications. But then at the same time, if we were to kind of step back and look at the whole wrestling culture, a lot of these wrestlers, majority of them come from akhadas where it is very common to have holy men. It is very closely associated to religion. You go to any akhada and the standard practice would be to have photos of Hanuman all over akhadas. In Chhatrasal Stadium in Delhi, for example, right at the akhada where there is a mud pit and next to it inside a hall there is a mat on which modern wrestling is played. Between those two there is a large frame of Hanuman right there, and you see wrestlers before they start their bout, they'll seek blessings of the Lord and then begin their practice. And the other reason is that since the sport is so much steeped in tradition, it's not uncommon to see a lot of sadhus, a lot of these seers who have been wrestlers in the past themselves. So in that sense, there is a crossover between the two, but whether that should happen at a national level, I don't think so. You have wrestlers across religions, across all over the country, and it's just not a good idea to mix the two of them, I guess.
Okay, so in this bout, you mentioned that these two rather unusual things happened. But you also write that in the end, Brij Bhushan Singh, he actually made all the wrestlers sit down and then he pointed out their technical errors and he even gave pointers to the coaches. And then towards the end, he even issued a new guideline. Could you talk about what that was?
Again, just the kind of person that he is, Brij Bhushan, it's common for him to advise wrestlers, give tips to coaches. Everyone listens to him. I don't know how much everyone implements what he tells them. He says that he has wrestled. And again, if we have to be fair, he does understand the sport. So that much we can give it to him. And I can't think of any federation president in India who spends as much time at the sport as Brij Bhushan does. I mean, he is there at event nationals, on selection trials, right from under 17 level to the senior level, men, women, both. So that much you give it to him. I mean, say for example, on Monday he was in Lucknow, Tuesday he traveled to Sonipat, Wednesday he was in Kochi, and next week he'll be in Serbia for the World Championships. So he does take it very seriously, and which is refreshing for an active politician, a 6-time MP from a big enough district in UP. He devotes a lot of time to wrestling. But he does have this other side to him. Some of the sequences that take place in wrestling in India are beyond bizarre, and there is no logical explanation to it. And one of the things was that you mentioned the instructions that he gave to the wrestlers, which among other things included that, look, whenever from now on you speak to the media, we expect that you will praise the government, praise Sports Authority of India, and praise the federation. And this has a background in this long tussle for credit which has been going on between the government and the federations at some level, and also the government and federations on one side versus a lot of private organizations that fund the athlete, that support the athlete on the other. So there has been this huge tussle going on behind the scenes, and that's the reason why he had to kind of spell it out. He told the wrestlers that, look, after a bout, you thank your sponsor, you thank your backers, but you never thank the federation, you never thank the government who are putting in so much effort, so much money in your training. And yeah, so if the next time you see a wrestler thanking the government and the federation, you know why that's happening.
And as someone who has been following the sport for some time, what kind of concerns does this overreach by Brij Bhushan raise for the sport and for the wrestlers?
It is tricky. This shouldn't happen. There is no two ways about it. We mentioned the women's wrestling over in the men's selection trials, which took place in Sonipat the following day. That's on Tuesday. Another bizarre sequence of events that took place is that a final was going on in one of the weight categories, and a wrestler had taken 9-0 lead. Now, the trials had dragged on for such a long time. They were supposed to technically get over it around 1:30 or 2 in the afternoon. They dragged on till 6:30. Everyone was bored out of their minds and tired generally. And Brij Bhushan was again sitting on a sofa with a mic. And once the wrestler had taken a 9-0 lead, he just needed one more point to kind of win the bout on technical superiority. Brij Bhushan has the mic in his hand and he just goes, "Arey referee, de dijiye inko ek point, ताकि 3 minute बच जाएंगे हमारे और हम सब घर जा सकते हैं." And everyone chuckled, and even Brij Bhushan was joking. But it was one of those moments where you don't know whether he's actually joking or he's actually instructing, because he's very powerful and he does have an impact on what happens on the mat indirectly, directly. So these kind of things, I'm sure, shouldn't be happening. But Brij Bhushan gets away with it because of his rustic sense of humor, his sarcasm. It's entertaining. I mean, I won't say it's not entertaining when you're at a selection trial, but whether all this should happen, it's completely bizarre. It shouldn't. Look, there have not been instances where his actions have impacted a result of a bout. So we should make that clear as well. At least in public domain, whatever information is available, his behavior, his actions have never had impact on bout. Most cases, he has resolved instances in a fair manner. So that much is there. But the way he does it, that's objectionable to many.
You were listening to 3 Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.